Okay, this video is about how to study mathematics. It's a simple approach that I recommend for those who are not used to studying mathematics. And if you apply it regularly, daily, you should have much success in the math course, whether it is basic math, intermediate algebra, college algebra, statistics, calculus, trigonometry. This is a pretty effective way of learning mathematics well. Now, let's take a look at this method. I call this method the 15-15-30 daily study method. The 15-15-30 refers to the number of minutes approximately that you should spend studying. If you add those up, you'll get 60, which is basically an hour a day. So I recommend that you spend at least an hour per day studying mathematics. And here's how it breaks down. The first 15 represents 15 minutes of review. The next 15 is 15 minutes of memorization. And the 30 is 30 minutes of practice. All three components are necessary for learning mathematics effectively. Let's break them down a little. I will start with the 15 minutes of memorization. The 15 minutes of memorization can be broken up into three smaller periods, three 5-minute memorization periods. I do not recommend that you spend a solid 15 minutes memorizing mathematical content, or for that matter, any content. I recommend you take that time and break it into smaller, bite size, so to speak, uh, time periods. And I recommend in the case of mathematics that you do 5 minutes in the morning, like at breakfast time or as you prepare to travel, 5 minutes in the early afternoon, like at lunchtime, 12, 1 o'clock or so, and 5 minutes in the evening. Though that time, those time periods you would use to memorize the same content. So you'll memorize something in the morning, then you'll go back through it again in the afternoon, and then you will go back through through that same material again in the evening. If you need to continue that process the next day, then you do that as well. And you do that until you learn the content. And then you add more material as you go along. I also recommend that you create flashcards or use a small composition booklet that is easy to carry around so that you can refer to them very quickly. And then I recommend that in in those flashcards or the booklet you write your definitions, your formulas, even some processes or algorithms of doing certain mathematical exercises. Start with small amounts of information and then add information over time and review them as you go along. Don't stop memorizing something once you think you've learned it. Every now and then go back and review it just to make sure you haven't forgotten. And remember, this is a daily process. So that 15 minutes is for 15 minutes of memorization, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the early afternoon, 5 minutes in the evening. Use flashcards or a small booklet and remember definitions, formulas, processes. The next 15 minutes of review is basically what we usually refer to as studying mathematics. You're learning the material for the first time, so you need to do this before you start practicing. A number of people waste time and energy and get frustrated by starting to practice mathematics right away because they believe that you cannot study mathematics. That is absurd. You have to study mathematics, but you can't only study mathematics. Once you study or review the material, then you practice afterwards, but not before. And while you're trying to learn the mathematics, it is best, I strongly recommend, that you remove all distractions. You do not learn well if you're listening to music, no matter what you tell yourself. That will distract you from the content you're trying to learn. Put away music, media, friends who will want to talk, social media, and so on. Find a place that is conducive to you. Do it at a time that you're most alert. For some people, that's early in the morning. For some people, that's in the middle of the day. Do not do this while you are tired. You need a fresh mind. And if you do that, you only need essentially 15 minutes to learn the material for a particular topic. And that 15 minutes can be used to review notes, the textbook. The textbooks usually has content for about a page or two, sometimes 3 or 4 pages, but not usually much more. And that is covers quite a number of different concepts. So you don't need to spend that much time learning the material if you're going through carefully, because mathematics at this level is relatively easy to understand. PowerPoints are also good, and you can find those either produced by your teacher or find them online. And additional resources for good review materials are YouTube videos and Khan Academy videos, which are getting better and better. And Khan Academy also has lessons in the form of articles that explain the concepts. I strongly recommend that you use the Khan Academy resources. So 15 minutes of memorization, 15 minutes of review, and after you review, you go into practice. You should spend at least 30 minutes per day of practice. And you must remember to review before you practice. Practicing before you're reviewing is like driving a car without lessons. You may get it moving, but you may crash. It's more likely that you'll crash. But once you practice ahead of time and see some approaches, then you can put those into practice if you review ahead of time, I mean. At this point, I would recommend you use a study group if possible of no more of 4 people in all. And I would not recommend a study group for studying the material, but I recommend a study group for practicing the material because there's less likelihood of being distracted. And you can also keep each other accountable and help each other solve the problems. I recommend that you try ease your problems first and then move as quickly as possible to the more challenging exercises and word problems. I strongly recommend word problems. And of course, Khan Academy has really good practice exercises for most math courses from as lower level as elementary school, first, second, and third grade, all the way up to calculus 2 and differential equations. So you can use those resources to help you to practice what you're learning. And of course, you can also use your textbook and other materials that may be found online. So, the last thing I want to tell you is don't wait. Just do the math. Begin today. Do not let the math pile up on you. The longer you take to start, the more overwhelming it will be when you start studying. So start today and use this time productively. That's all for this video. All the best in your math.